Check out my building, man.
Yeah, about that.
What?
Are you sure you followed these instructions?
I think so.
Hello, my fellow gnomes. My name is GnomeCode, and today I've got a video that I hope is going to help a lot of you guys out. Now, I know how frustrating it can be when your code isn't quite doing what you want it to, especially if you're new to developing games. But don't feel down, because having errors is all very much part of the process. So you don't feel silly or stupid just because you can't get something to work quite right away. In fact, I promise you that some of the very best developers in the world right now are probably scratching their heads trying to fix things because their code isn't working. So don't despair. And the good news is we're going to learn how to fix it. So if you make it through this video, I promise you I've got some tips that will hopefully help with your current issue and also leave you feeling a lot more confident in the future when one of those dreaded red errors appear. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the dark arts of troubleshooting. Okay, so let's have a look at this beautiful trampoline I've got set up here. And you notice when I jump on it, absolutely nothing is happening, but I want it to fling me into the air, but it's not really doing much at all. So I don't know why my script isn't working. Let's see how we might go about trying to work out the reasons. So we're going to do a bit of investigative work. So I'll hit stop. And if I go over to the model, we can access the script, the bound script, and we'll open it up. And here it is. Now, the first thing you might notice is this script. It was actually made by Clone Trooper 1019. You might recognize this name. He's a pretty good developer. So I've grabbed this script from him. And this is always something to watch out for. If you're going to take other people's scripts, then you might not understand what's involved and how they work. And so when they go wrong, it's going to be very difficult for you to then figure out why. So you've got to make sure you have a really firm understanding of all the fundamentals. Now, this is fine if you're new to scripting, right? You're just not going to have that knowledge straight away. But I've got loads of tutorials on my channel which aim specifically at the beginner. So I've got a series teaching you all the basics you'll need to know. And if you're following any of my other tutorials, then the beginner series is really a prerequisite level of knowledge that you're going to need. You're going to need to know about if statements, functions, properties, variables, all those good stuff. If some of those things are going over your head, then you've really got to make sure you know what you're talking about before you start editing other people's scripts. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into a bit of a mess. Now, talking of a mess, and this is point number 2, you'll see that this whole script is quite tricky to read. It's not formatted properly at all. Now, in scripting, we like to use code blocks. So every time we have something like a function here, what we really want to do is have everything inside of that function tabbed inwards. So you press the tab key and it's indented. And that makes it so much easier to then see where one block of code starts and ends and the next one begins. And that will help you when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong. You've got to read through the code. And if your code is really hard to read, then it's going to make that job a lot harder. So you can go through and manually tab it like I was just doing. Ideally, you want to be doing it as you're writing it. But if you just go to the top here, you see there's this format selection button. If I click down here, I can just click format document. And when I do that, it'll automatically format the entire thing for me, which makes it a lot easier to see each stage of the logic. So there's a function, there's an if statement, there's another if statement, and so on. So now our script is easier to read. We really need to start digging through it to see if we can spot anything that could be wrong. And hopefully by now you've figured out and spotted we have a rather glaring red underline here. We've got these numbers on the side of the script to help us. So this is line number 12 of our script. And we've got this big red underline, which is instantly telling us something is wrong. So whenever you see a red underline, pay attention to it, something's wrong. And if you hover over with your cursor, you'll get a little tooltip which tells us, clues us into what the issue might be. So here it's saying there's an unknown global vector 3. So it's saying it doesn't know what this word means. We've written vector3. What's that? It doesn't recognize it. Now, if we look below, we've actually got a bit of a clue here. So we can see this one, vector3, is highlighted in blue. So that means the game or the script is recognizing this instance. We've got instances and vector3s and so on. So these are recognized keywords. And if we look, this one has a capital V and this one has a lowercase. So if I was just to swap that out to an uppercase V, it's going to correct it into blue, so we know it's correct, and the underline goes away. So the tooltips are a good thing to watch out for on those underlines. But another really important tool in your scripter's toolbox, and arguably one of the most important things you need to have open while scripting, is the output window. So if we go to the View tab of Studio, and there's all various windows we can open up. But we don't need all of these, but you must have, while you're scripting, you must have the output window open. So click here, output, a new window will appear. I'll just clear it for now. And let's see what happens if I run the game with that lowercase v. So I've got an underline here. And if I click play, and I'm going to watch the output now. You see, I just get some default purple text telling me that the file has been saved and so on. But if I go over to the trampoline and jump on it, I'm going to instantly start to get the error message. It's telling me, if we read the whole thing in red, workspace.trampoline.bouncer.bounce script. So that's actually following the hierarchy within the Explorer. So if we go to workspace, to the PL3 trampoline, find bouncer, and there is bounce script. So it's pointing us, it's telling us where the script, where the error is coming from. So we know which script it is. And then it has a number, :12. And that's telling us it's coming from line 12. And then we've got the error message associated with it. Now you'll notice when I hover my cursor over this, I get a pointer and I can click on this and I'm going to get taken into the script now. The game is still running, but I'm inside of the script and it's pointed me directly onto line 12, which is what the error was pointing out. And of course, we can see that red underline, and we now know we need to just correct that with an uppercase V, like so. Now, learning how to read the output and understand the error messages can be a little tricky when you're starting off and you're not quite sure on what all the language means. But the important thing is once you can figure out which script it's coming from, what line it is, and you can sometimes get a bit of a clue. But let's try and read through this one just so we can get a real good understanding of it. It's saying attempt to index nil with nil. So the problem there is not saying that there's something wrong with a new command. It's saying whatever preceded new was nil. So we try to say nil.new. So in this case, we knew that we needed to change it to a vector3 with a capital V. But let's give another example. Let's say this time, instead of on line 5, where it says hit.parent, let's say I had a typo and I had a double T on the end of it. So this time when I'm going to play, and if I go over to the trampoline, I'm going to get a slightly different error, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's saying parent double T is not a valid member of the mesh part, and then saying what part. So here we have the hit parameter, right, which was ever part was touching the trampoline, and it's saying that part, so in this case the left foot, does not have anything called parent double T. So this is a really common thing you're going to get in your scripts to do with things being nil or things not existing if you've got a typo. Another one you might have, let's say we remove the parameter altogether from the function. So once we've done that, you'll see that hit has become underlined in red. Okay, so hit no longer exists. Unknown global hit. A bit similar to down here, but instead of something being misspelled, we just doesn't exist. It's never been defined. So now if I hit play, and I went over to the trampoline, very similar error. It's now saying attempt to index nil with parent. So again, it's not saying that the parent is incorrect. It's saying that the thing of which you try to get the parent doesn't exist. And so if you go to that line on line 5, you say, oh, I haven't defined hit. So in this case, it was supposed to be a parameter of the function, because that's what's sent to us by the touch event. Now, so far, we've just talked about errors and how to read the output, and that'll get you a long way. But sometimes you have a script and it doesn't work, and yet there's no error in the output. The error messages will only appear if you've made something called a syntax error, right? Something that causes it to actually break. But a lot of the time, your script won't work simply because you've given the wrong instructions. That part of the logic that you want to happen is maybe not being reached for some reason. There's a problem with the logic itself, even if the logic does make sense. So if we hit stop, we'll see if we can figure out why this isn't working. Now, sometimes you can just read through the script and you might spot the error somewhere. But this is a lot harder, especially if you had a really big script. This is only 25 lines, but of course, if there was hundreds and hundreds of lines, you're probably not going to want to go through and meticulously comb through every single line. That'd be quite difficult. Thankfully, though, there's a few tips to sort of help us figure out what's going wrong. And one really easy way to start doing this is by using the print command. So we could put at the very top of our script, right on line 1, we said print the script is running. And so when we start using these prints, they will then appear in our output window down below. So it gives us a little bit of feedback about what's happening. So now when I click play, I can see that the script is running message. So I'm no longer completely blind, right? Perhaps I could have disabled this script. If this enable property, if that had been disabled, and I then ran it, I wouldn't see the message. And so straight away, I know something's wrong. So it's really good to throw in these print statements to allow you to see what's actually happening behind the scenes and where the script is getting to. So I could put another one inside of this function. Remember, this function is only going to be called when something touches. So maybe this isn't being fired for some reason. Maybe this function isn't running. So we can print, we can say has been touched, and we could even put the name of the parameter. We could put that as an additional thing to print out. So we could check the value of it has been touched, and then we print out hit. And then we could even print out as character, right? So we know this if statement is true, because if it's false, then it's going to ignore all of this code and that won't print out. And then we could even print out as humanoid, right? If this if condition is true. And then finally, we could print out as root and no velocity, because that's what this line here is checking. So once we've checked all of these things, right, we're going to have a print for each one and allow us to see where the script gets to. So if we hit play now, we can do a bit of detective work and we can maybe figure out where the problem is located in our script. So this gives us something to work with if we've got no errors. So now if I jump onto the trampoline, and I'm going to get a bunch of prints because that's going to fire multiple times. But if we look, it says has been touched, and it prints out humanoid root part. It then says has character. Then it immediately say has been touched, and it keeps listing different parts that just impacted the trampoline just then. So clearly we haven't got all of those print statements that we typed out. So let's hit stop, and if we have a look at our script, we can see it's printed out this one, and this one. But it hasn't printed out has humanoid. So therefore we know that this if condition isn't true. This isn't running for some reason. So we'd have to look at this condition if humanoid, which of course comes from line 10 where we create the humanoid variable. And here we're looking inside the character, which we checked did exist. And it's going to find first child. It's looking for an object called humanoid. So the character doesn't contain an object called humanoid. And if you're particularly observant, you might notice that, well, of course, the character doesn't contain an object called humanoid with a lowercase h because it's spelled with an uppercase h. So that's the problem there. If when we go into our game playing, we can double check. Yeah, it's a double H it needs to be. So an uppercase H. And so if I swap that out for the correct one, humanoid, now we'll see when we touch the trampoline, It should work for us. Woo! And we also get all those prints. So we know the script is running all the way through. Now, using prints are nice and easy, but they can be a little bit messy. So let's delete all of these. And another way you can go about seeing what's happening in your script as it runs is to use something called breakpoints. Now, you might have accidentally clicked one of these line numbers on the side before. And if you do that, you'll notice you get this little red dot. So I can put a red dot at each of these if statements here, here, and here. And when I do that, it's going to create a point which the script is going to stop at and sort of check what's happening. So if I click play now, I can play the game as normal, but as soon as I interact with the script, watch what happens. I'm going to jump on the trampoline, and suddenly the game is going to freeze, look, and I had all these new windows appear. I've got the output. I can close that for now. We've got a call stack. We've got a breakpoints screen. So this is showing me all the breakpoints I've created on line 6, 8, and 10. And we can see the call stack. We're currently on line number 6. But what we want to pay attention to is this watch window. So if I click down here, open up the watch window, and you'll see this actually gives us the variables that we've got in our script, character or char and hit, and it tells us the value of them. This is very useful. Instead of just printing it out, we can see what those values are. So character is my character GnomeCode, hit is the humanoid root part, and so we're currently on line 6. If I click resume again, we're going to continue to the next line. So I'll click resume, and now we're on line 8, if humanoid. And so look, now we've got a new value has appeared inside the watch window. The humanoid, we can see it has the correct value as we'd expect. If I click resume one more time, now we've got a root part variable, and we can see the different properties of it. Now, velocity is a bit of a weird property because it's now changed to these new velocity ones, but we can see these velocity values are less than 200, so therefore it will be adding in this. So this is going to be true. So that's what it looks like with all the values correct. But if I had this with the lowercase h again, and I was playing, you'll see as soon as I get to line 8, and I look inside the watch, you'll see the humanoid, the value is void. So that would tell us again that the humanoid variable is incorrect, and therefore this line wasn't running, just like we did with the print statements, but it just saves us having to actually write them. Of course, once you're finished with these breakpoints, make sure just to click on the spots again and they will disappear. So by this point, you should be able to narrow down what the problem is, but maybe you're still struggling to solve it. Thankfully though, there's lots of ways to get help. The first thing you need to be doing is making good use of the Roblox Wiki. When I'm working on projects, I always have a few tabs open with various different articles and pages of documentation, and there's some really great information on the site, so you should definitely get into the habit of using it. I'll leave a link to the wiki down in the description, but it's usually just the first search result for any web search anyway, so if you're doing any kind of research, it should pop up. Let's say you're doing some work with the humanoids. Well, here's a page all about the humanoid with all the information you need to know. For example, it tells you that you need a humanoid root part, and there needs to be a part named head connected to the torso in order for it to work in the first place. And maybe you're doing something, let's say you're wanting to use one of the events, maybe using the move to finished event. For example, maybe you've been following my tower defense tutorial series, which relies on the move to and move to finish commands. But you'll notice here there's some information which actually explains that after 8 seconds, the humanoid will stop walking and it will time out. And look, they even give you a code sample for something that you could do to avoid that timeout state. This can be very useful. And so, for each of these functions, it shows you all the different parameters, if there are any, and a quick example of how to use it. Now, another website to bear in mind and help you with your issues is the Roblox Developer Forums. Now, you probably don't have membership to post on the forums, but you can search through previous posts. and you might well be able to find someone who's encountered the same error message or the same problem that you did. And if you're lucky, somebody else might have already solved that problem for you. Now, if you are still struggling though, and you've taken all the steps I've outlined so far, then it's probably time to just go ahead and ask for help somewhere. You could go and ask on the developer forums if you have membership there, or you can join my special Gnomeland Discord where we have our own development help channel along with various other chat channels which you may be interested in. As always, the link will be in the description to that. But if you do go and ask a help question, it's really important that you try and give as much information as possible. I can't tell you how frustrating it is when I see people looking for help and they've just left a blank help message, which doesn't really give much for us to go on. Everyone in our servers and anywhere really on the web that you're going to ask, they're just volunteers giving some time to help you. So if you're going to want their help, you might as well help them out a bit first by doing a little bit of work to try and figure out the problem, at least narrow down what you think the issue is, and provide as much information as possible. And if they are able to help you, be sure to thank them. So hopefully you're now well on your way to being a scripting master. I wish you all the best with your future troubleshooting. And until next time, goodbye!